Good evening, and I want to welcome committee members, council members, staff, and the general public to the October meeting of the Public Works Committee. Due to the pandemic, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there is a vote, a roll call will be conducted. A committee member will be recognized, raise their hand, and state their vote. Committee members are Councilmember Barbara Haynes Burke, Vice Chair, Councilmember John Larson, Councilmember Annette Scipio, and myself, Jeff McIntosh. As is our custom, we have several items on the consent agenda that, unless they are pulled, will be voted on with one motion. And then we also have some agenda items. Is there anything that committee members or council members would like to see pulled from the consent agenda?
C2, please.
C2. Anything else? If I can get a motion to approve the balance, I'd appreciate it.
Motion to approve the balance.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could I have city clerk call the roll?
Councilmember McIntosh.
Oh, hold on. I go. Yes.
Councilmember McIntosh, this is Aaron King. I hate to jump in there, but remember item G or C1, the fragrant lane, we need to continue that to January.
Thank you very much. Yep, we talked about that. So yes, we're just really, what we're doing is we're approving the Public Works minutes. So if I can get a motion on that.
A motion to approve Public Works minutes.
Second.
Thank you. Now the roll call.
Councilmember Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Aye. Okay, thank you, Aaron. You told me that we talked about that this afternoon and I forgot. And while we're on that subject, if there is no objection from the committee or from council members, I want to hold item G3 in committee. There's some more information that I would like staff to gather on this item before we discuss it publicly. Okay, with that said, City Clerk, can we have item G1, please?
Item G1 or G2.
C2.
C2, resolution approving the construction of the Wake Forest rowing shed structure at Salem Lake Marina.
And I've got in my notes that Mr. Taylor is going to at least kick this off. You're muted.
Afternoon, Councilmember McIntosh, or evening now, other members of the committee and council. I'm going to turn this one over to Mr. Greg James to give an explanation.
Thank you, Mr. James.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, committee members and members of the City Council. My name is Greg James. I'm the Special Facilities Superintendent for Recreation and Parks. We have received a request from Wake Forest to add a structure at Salem Lake. This structure will house their rowing boats. As you enter into the facility, it's proposed it will be constructed on the left-hand side of the gate. This will allow us to move their rowing boats that are currently at the edge of the water back, giving us some more space for kayaks, and it will give us a better aesthetic at the front.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. James? Councilmember Scipio, and you're muted.
When I read this, I thought this was an interesting and very wonderful proposal, because I think this shows how community works together with government for an overall enhancement for both the community group as well as the government facilities. And I think it's an excellent use of the land. I do have a question, though. And the question is that this particular building, when constructed, is going to house exclusively the rowing equipment of the Wake Forest rowing team. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councilmember Scipio, yes. We will have access to the building, however, we do not intend to store anything in there ourselves.
And our access is not, it's just that if something happens on site, we will be able to take care of whatever it is. But it does become the property of the city. Is that correct? Is a
So-
certain kind of agreement?
Yeah, there'll be an agreement put in place. It won't impact anything with our property, but as I said, it will make for a cleaner aesthetic. A rowboat is a large vessel, it's around about 66 feet. So clearing that from the side will allow for a much cleaner aesthetic. And with our phase 2 work down there, it will really enhance the visibility of the lake for the citizens.
And who takes care of the ongoing maintenance of the building itself?
Wake Forest will be entirely responsible for that.
Ongoing maintenance, yes. All right, thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Councilmember Larson, I apologize. I did not see your hand up there.
That's fine, Chairman. This building will be the property of Wake Forest University or Winston-Salem.
It will be. I'm sorry.
The building itself, the structure itself will be owned by.
We'll defer to William Royston, our director.
I'm sorry. Is Wake Forest going to be the owner of the structure, or is the city going to be the owner of the structure?
Wake Forest will remain as the owner of the structure. We'll provide them an easement onto our property for the building to be constructed, but their overall structure itself will be the property of Wake Forest University.
So am I to assume that all maintenance, I think was answered, all maintenance responsibility will be Wake Forest, and we have an agreement on liability as far as any exposure the city might have regarding that structure? So we have part of the agreement deals with removing the city from any exposure on it.
That's correct. Yeah.
And do we have any agreements elsewhere in the city where we allow private individuals or corporations to occupy land owned by the city for their own personal use or institutional use outside of what the public can use? Is this an exception to the rule, or do we have other examples in the city?
We have other examples. One of the most notable examples will be the facility that we have over near South Fork with the Model Railroading Company. They've leased property from the city, and we have agreements in place and standards and templates that we can follow to make sure that this is not an exception to that rule.
That was my questions. Thank you very much.
Let me call on Council Angela Carmen here if she wanted to say a word.
Thank you, Chairman McIntosh. And I wanted to just emphasize that our encroachment agreements do have insurance requirements and so forth to make sure the city is not liable in the event of any injury related to that structure or the use of the structure.
And to add a note, we also have agreements with the school system over facilities and use of Haynes Park and other facilities. So this does not seem to me to be out of line with our with what we have done in the past. Okay, any other questions or comments? Councilmember Scipio.
This is just a future kind of thought. Mr. Royston, with this, I can see a lot of people getting interested in kayaking a little bit more at Salem Lake because you have this team out there. Is there a possibility that we can think of providing some type of recreational training program for kayaking on the lake? I think I heard or saw that we were allowing kayaking at Quarry Park. But I don't know if there's any training associated with that. You have to be, I assumed, already a skilled kayaker to go on Quarry Park.
Councilmember Scipio, we do offer programs at Salem Lake that kind of provide an introduction to kayaking for citizens that register for those programs. The newer program that we've currently instituted over at the quarry is to provide an opportunity for people to have an opportunity to get down on the water. A lot of people have the ability to visit Quarry at Grant Park from a higher elevation. Getting them down to the water level provides another opportunity for us to kind of share this gem of a park that we have and this resource that we have as a recreational facility with the citizens of Winston-Salem. But we do offer programs pretty regularly through the year. The program at the quarry is a new program that we're starting. We wanted to make sure that we have the safety measures in place, but we do have staff on site, and we're able to manage that appropriately.
Thank you so much.
All right, can I get a motion on this, please?
I move for approval of C2.
Second, Burke.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Clerk could call the roll.
Councilmember Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Councilmember Mack.
Aye. Okay, now on to G1.
Item G1, public hearing on ordinance to rename a street or road in Winston-Salem, Marydale Drive to Mary Valley Lane.
Thank you. And this is a public hearing, so I'll open the public hearing. I'm sorry? Nobody's, okay, we don't have anybody signed up. So ordinarily we would open the public hearing, but since we have no one here, can I go ahead and close it? All right. I'm new at this job. Okay, could we get a reading on G1, please?
Councilmember McIntosh,
There's no report to go along with it? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure we officially open and then close the public hearing. I'm not sure I heard everything correctly. Did you
Okay.
open and close it?
I officially opened the public hearing. And now I'm going to close the public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're good. Okay, let's go. Let me refer to Aaron King on this for a report.
All right. Thank you, Chairman McIntosh and members and council members, members of the committee. I'm going to share my screen. And I hope, if I can see a head nod, can you guys see that okay?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, great. So this is G1, and this is an item for a street renaming from Marydale Drive to Mary Valley Lane. And so if you can see here, this is on the edge of the city limits along Old Hollow Road. And the portion in question is really just this small segment. You've got a detailed map in your packet that extends from Old Hollow Road basically to the city limits line. That's what's in question. I think there's a total of about 3 property owners there that are impacted. What's necessitating this is the northern Beltway construction, which you can't really see from this map, this geodata screen that you've got here, but your map in your packet illustrates it a little bit better. It's coming through just to the north of here, and it's actually already cut Marydale Drive in 2. It's bisected. You can see this old image here shows the length of the street. The Beltway comes through here, which again, you can't see on this map. So per our addressing policy, we don't want to have disconnected street segments of the same name. And so that's what's prompting this renaming of this small portion of Marydale Drive to Mary Valley Lane. You can see here, NCDOT, as part of the Beltway project, has actually constructed a new Marydale Drive, which comes off of Old Hollow Road here. You can see the center line of that road that comes northward here and ties back into Marydale Drive, so that continues onward. So again, we do need to change the name of that so that we don't have a disconnected street segment. And the name that's being proposed here is Mary Valley Lane. Our map for site addressing team handles addressing for the city of Winston-Salem. They sent letters to the neighbors to advise them of the change and solicit suggestions for the new road name, and Mary Valley Lane was the name that was proposed. I'm glad to answer any questions on this one if there are any.
Questions from the committee or council? Okay, hearing none. Aaron, this is in the Northeast Ward?
That is correct.
So Councilmember Burke, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I would like to make a motion to approve item G1.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Clerk, if we can get a roll call.
Councilmember Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Aye. All right, let's see if we can handle G2 any smoother.
Item G2, public hearing on ordinance to rename a street or road in Winston-Salem, Phelps Drive to Chamberlain Castle Court.
Okay, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask the clerk if there's anybody to speak on this. There is not, so I'm officially going to close the public hearing. All right, I get thumbs up all the way around on this one. Okay, So, Mr. King, if we could have a report on that as well, please.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So hopefully you guys can see my screen here as well. I'll zoom out a little bit. This is a similar situation. The Beltway, again, is cutting off existing street of one name and disconnecting the segments. This is up Box Mountain Road is probably the larger road that you might be familiar with. White Rock Road is to the south in that image there. And the particular area in question is Phelps Drive. So, and the particular area that is being discussed tonight is this very small section from Sandusky Street up to where the Beltway will come through, which is in this general area here. I'll pan out a little bit. You can see that Phelps Drive is a much longer existing drive that heads northward. So again, the Beltway coming through will split Phelps Drive and we'll leave this small remnant here. The remainder of Phelps Drive will stay in place. It will be accessed by Old Hollow Road up here where it currently connects, so that will function fine. So again, what is in question tonight is renaming this very small section of Phelps Drive from Sandusky up to the Beltway, from Phelps Drive to Chamberlain Castle Court. NCDOT owns the land on, I think, the left-hand side here, and the Chamberlain family owns the parcels on the right. So it's essentially one property owner that is affected. They own multiple parcels. They were notified by Map Forsyth staff as well. They suggested the name Chamberlain Castle Court. They're supportive of that, and staff would recommend approval of this as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. King? Okay, I don't think that was a question. There are no questions. I believe, is this in the Northeast Ward as well?
It is. It is.
Okay, can I get a motion from the council?
Yes, I move for approval of item G2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. If we could get a roll call.
Councilmember Burke,
Yes.
Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Scipio,
Yes.
Councilmember McIntosh.
Aye. Okay, and so we're going to skip G3. If we could have item G4, please.
Item G4, presentation on policy and procedure for painting on streets and sidewalks.
Thank you. I had asked staff to bring this up. We had some requests this year from folks who wanted to paint an intersection on Trade Street, and there was some consternation. I don't think people felt really confident that they knew how we were going to handle this. So I've asked staff to just put together a quick presentation on what is legal to do and what the parameters are if somebody wants to paint one of our streets. And this again goes to Mr. King or Mr. Fansler.
Thank you, Chairman McIntosh. I'm going to let our Deputy DOT Director, Jeff Fansler, present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Fansler.
Thank you, Mr. King, and good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee and council. Hope you all can hear me well. I will do my best to be brief and give you, as instructed, a quick overview of our street mural program, which basically governs how we handle requests to paint streets and sidewalk within the city. And right on time, I appreciate the slide presentation there. So next slide, please. Real briefly, an overview and agenda of what we'll discuss this evening is basically the process of how we handle these applications and requests to paint our streets and sidewalks. We'll go over actually the city ordinance that governs that request, and then talk about the application process. And then we'll briefly discuss the responsibilities of both the applicant and the city of how we administer those requests. And then finally, we'll go over kind of the methodology of installation and maintenance that's expected of the applicant. So thank you for the slide there. As I mentioned, the process is pretty straightforward. I will say this was really finalized and adopted in last year, 2020, when we really took a better look at how we handle these applications and requests to paint our public streets. So essentially, we get a request from an entity or an individual that may want to do some type of art on a public right-of-way, street or sidewalk, and then we would have that discussion with them, and they would issue, or we would send them the application to paint said street or sidewalk. And they would fill out application, and then we would go through a staff review process. At this stage of the process, this is where we kind of have some back and forth, where we're in discussions with the applicant to make sure they fully understand of their responsibilities. They understand how to fill out the application, what all is asked of them to provide. Once we feel like we're in good standing with the application and they've satisfied all the obligations within, we would then schedule that and then request for that to be placed on the next city council agenda, where it would then be up for consideration. And that, of course, if approved, in the next phase of the process would lead then into installation, which would be the requirement of the petitioner to install whatever was approved by city council. Next slide, please. So real briefly, this is a little bit wordy, but this is actually the ordinance from city code. It says it shall be unlawful for any person to write, paint, or place upon the paving or surface of any of the sidewalks or streets of the city any words, pictures, or advertisements of any kind whatsoever, as for any person or for any person to cause such acts to be done, except for illuminatory purposes. And then it goes on, it talks a little bit about except for city council, permission. And that's kind of where I want to spend a little bit of time discussing. So if you go to the next slide, I'll get into more detail about that.
Mr. Fenzer, can you stop and define illuminatory?
I had a strange feeling that question was going to be asked tonight, so I made sure that Mr. Webster was right on cue. But basically, it's basically for a charitable, anything charitable or to be done for charity. That is the definition of that. And I will kindly defer to our city attorney if I misspoke there, but that is my understanding.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, this is the part where, we felt as staff and city council, I thought with great oversight, and wanted to kind of define how we handle applications and handle requests for painting the streets and sidewalks. So we formalized a process that, of course, formally adopted last year, and it kind of goes over these 6 main steps here. Basically, the petitioner or the applicant would have to submit a completed application that I talked about. Staff would then review that application to ensure its completeness. That, again, is where we go back and forth to make sure that what we need to see from them is fully vetted and we understand what we're getting from the petitioner. And I'll talk more about the details of the application here in just another slide or two. So moving on, if the application is complete, as I mentioned, we will forward that application to city council for consideration. Of course, if it's incomplete, there's that back and forth we typically have, trying to make sure that we get a better understanding. We really understand it, and they document what they're trying to do. And then, of course, once we feel that has been satisfied, it will then be added to the next available city council agenda. And then lastly, city council shall consider and vote upon the application at their next meeting. Next slide, please. So the application, this is the actual document that we would present and send to the applicant or petitioner requesting to do some type of art or mural on a sidewalk or public street. Basically, it's 9 different elements that we're asking them to provide so that we can understand what and where they're trying to do this art. So essentially, we're asking for the mural type and description, and we ask for as much detail as we can get so we have a good, clear picture. And that way we can present it, as best detail as we can to City Council for consideration. Of course, we want to know where that's going, so the proposed mural location is very key in this process to make sure that we understand exactly the intent of this art to go. And then, of course, we want to know who's going to be doing it, the artists, the designers, who's involved, and number 4, their community engagement. What level of community input has been involved with the request, and how is this being vetted through the community? And then one of the things that DOT looks at specifically is the materials. What type of treatment would be used for the road? Of course, traffic paint is a waterborne paint. We're looking for something comparable to keep contaminants, with rain and stuff out of our storm drain system. So there is a material review. So they have to provide those details for us to consider. And then timeline. We want to know when and, basically the schedule of understanding that the time it takes to get through city council and then where their understanding of when this would go. So we can, of course, do our community outreach and then make sure that there's no other events taking place on the street. Just coordinate all that and understand when that will take place. We also asked the petitioner to give us an idea of how they plan to maintain it. Should there be an issue with deterioration or maybe graffiti or something of that nature that would cause an issue with the painting or or Mural. So we asked them to consider a maintenance schedule for that as well. And then any copyright issues, making sure that they've addressed those issues through their application formally. And then lastly, how to facilitate, if this is going to require a formal street closure, how they would handle that. Is it going to be impacted traffic, and making sure that we're working safely in the public right of way, and making sure that everyone is properly within a designated area that we can then control traffic around that. So those are the basic 9 elements within the application that staff does review. And then, as I mentioned, it goes back and forth with the petitioner until we feel we have enough information on these items to accurately present that to City Council for proper consideration. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I mentioned I'll go over briefly kind of the differences between what the applicant would be responsible for, and then the next slide would be what for the city responsibilities would be for. So the applicant essentially, they're tasked with giving us as much detail as requested in the application as they can provide. That way we can present as much as I mentioned, to City Council to have all that presented up front. And then, of course, the Mural location, the selection process of who's going to be doing the work. And then, of course, we would like to see any community engagement or outreach process that's facilitating that work. And then the approved materials list. We often have discussions with the petitioner who may be unfamiliar with the type of materials that will be needed for marking on a street. And then we have those discussions to make sure that we can get something that's safe to use. And then, as I mentioned, the maintenance of the mural, how we handle those instances should they come up. And then we're also asking them to submit a traffic control plan. We do put that on the petitioner to make sure that they understand the need for working safely, and we ask that they would submit that to us for review. And then, of course, lastly, we ask that they provide quality control and on-site management during installation to make sure that it's essentially run properly, that there's nothing going on during the event when they're actually in the street working or on the sidewalk, to make sure that things actually working safe and there's no issues when it is actually being installed. Next slide, please. And real briefly, the city responsibilities are essentially, as I mentioned, to review the application for compliance with city ordinance that we discussed, review the location for traffic impacts, both for vehicle traffic and pedestrian traffic if it's on a sidewalk. Obviously, we spend a lot of time here making sure that we're coordinating that well. So it's a prime location for what they need, as well as the safety of the traveling public. Of course, we're going to screen the materials to make sure that there's no environmental issues or there's no issues with the roadway. In conflict with potential pavement markings or something that could be a hazard to commuting traffic. And then, of course, we're preparing the city council agenda item for consideration. And then we have in the past been requested to provide the traffic control measures. And so we facilitate that. There is a fee schedule with that. This is something we do for entities that call in. They can request our traffic control devices. And of course, there's associated fees to do that. So we would administer that like we do for a number of different things throughout the city. And then, of course, if needed, we would provide on-site observation during construction to make sure that traffic control stays in place, things are going well, there's no one pouring paint down a storm drain or something like that. There's just the proper protocols are being done to make sure that things are handled the way they should be. Next slide, please. And then lastly, really, it's showtime. Once we get through all the formalities of reviewing the application, getting things back and forth on the materials, and then having city council approve it, it's time to install the mural that has been approved by city council. So essentially, this becomes an event management type practice where we're making sure that things are running well. They've already got the approved list. They've got the approved of what type or what the actual mural would say or if there's artwork. All that has been pre-approved. At this point, we're making sure that it's just being facilitated the way it should be. And then, of course, within the application, there is a maintenance agreement as part of the application where they understand their responsibilities to maintain these murals or paintings on the streets and sidewalks. So if there's an issue, they would be asked to come back and make those corrections. And so with that, I believe that is all. Next slide, please. I think it's just a question slide. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions that you or the committee may have. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Fansler. As always, a well done presentation. Committee members or council members, are there questions pertaining to this policy that you might have? Councilmember Scipio.
Mr. Fansler, we have not adopted this policy, or have we adopted it?
We have. It was September of 2020.
Of 2020. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
we adopt so many things, I just get you sort of forget them. Just a little recommendation. First, a recommendation. The ordinances, wherever they're written, it'd be great to show when we adopted it. Whenever you show it to us again, if we just have a date when it's adopted, so we'll know how old it is. And then secondly, did the council ever get the Pride sidewalk approval to us for approval? I know there was an application in July.
That's a great question. We did receive that application. Well, we submitted that application to them, and what we were told is they were going to review that. When we had asked for some of the details that I talked about, they were going to pull back and shoot for another time. So I think they were just waiting on that, and they were going to resubmit at a later date. Okay,
because I know I had it. I just didn't follow up to find out if it had gone through, and I didn't remember us seeing it at the council. So, all right. What about the mural that's out in front of City Hall? It's faded out now. And so is it going to be repainted or maintained, or what's going to happen with it? Or is it just going to fade out?
So that's a great question. And to be honest, that has exceeded its life expectancy, I think. And it was so many different artists involved with that. I'd have to go back and see what all was involved with making, since it was such a comprehensive effort. But essentially, it has really, exceeded what we thought it would do. And so at this point, I don't know of any plans to refresh or redo any of that. We certainly haven't received another application. At this point, it's likely going to just fade out. Or when we do our resurfacing of the street, then it would take care of that as well.
So I don't know if our policy speaks, I know you said something about speaking to maintenance, but I don't know if there's a timeline for maintenance for some things. And so I think we might want to think about that also. And whether they're temporary or permanent.
Thank you, Councilmember Larson.
Thank you, Chairman. One quick question. When we talk about submitting it to City Council, am I assuming that we are going to run through the committee structure as usual? It's not a straight shot into the council agenda.
It would come before this body before it goes to City Council.
We go to the appropriate committee, right? Second thing, there's this fine line of freedom of speech, and there's nothing in our guidelines that say in the evaluation of the material to be put out as to what would be appropriate or what would not be appropriate to put on city street sidewalks and what have you. Right
on cue, Angela Carmen popped up on the screen. I was going to ask that same question. So if she could I know we talked about this in the past, but if we could, and that's kind of the reason for having this conversation, is just to remind people what we previously discussed.
What we agreed to.
I'll come back to you.
Sure, I'll be happy to address that. Essentially, this ordinance provides that the message that is placed on the street is considered government speech. As a city government has the ability and the same rights as any other speaker to decide what message it wants to convey. So when city council as a body approves it, is saying this is a message that the government itself has approved and is willing to convey. So it's not subject to the ordinary First Amendment viewpoint discrimination claims that folks sometimes make. So it's considered government speech, which is why the body has to basically approve and say, we're adopting this message as part of a message we want to send out as government.
So, Council Member, is a separation of church and state an element in these discussions?
It has, but again, we're looking at the message itself in terms of whether or not this is a message that the governing body wants to convey. So you can, in essence, decide because of that what message you want to convey or don't want to convey. You can exercise discretion without those First Amendment type claims, if that answers your question. If not, I'll be happy to address it via a memo.
I think that answers it.
Okay.
I mean, we can have Merry Christmas, on there. So.
I mean, if that's what the government wants to convey.
Right. Thank you.
Any other questions before I make a few comments? So again, I wanted to bring this up to facilitate a discussion. I want to ask this committee if there is any appetite to promote this, to try to encourage more usage of this. We've got 5 higher educational institutions in this city that would probably love to get their message out. I mean, I think there's probably lots of organizations. We've got a public arts commission. It seems to me like our city streets are kind of a canvas to work off of, but I'll entertain other people's opinions on that to see if that's something we want to actively pursue.
Mr. Chair, I'll give you a comment.
Councilmember Larson first, I'll come back to you. Councilmember Scipio.
I personally like to have our streets clean and clear. That's my personal opinion. I think when you open up streets and sidewalks, even by application for people to paint and put things on, there were going to be people who will say, oh, they painted that over there, and I'm going to paint this on mine. They ignore the process. And therefore, I think you open up a can of worms that you then have to now police by that. We have an ordinance that says it shall be unlawful for any person to write, paint, or place upon the paving or surface of any of the sidewalks or streets of the city. I think we should adhere to that policy. If people want to have public art and use public spaces for art expressions, I think there are many of those spaces that are available other than the sidewalks and the streets. Unless there's something very, very unique. But I can see our whole city being inundated with what could be graffiti because we've allowed lots of painting through application. They think that's normal process and procedures because that's how people see it. They don't always follow the rules. So I would not open it up for just to have artistic expressions all around the city on streets and sidewalks. I think there are buildings where that can be used. I find painting and things on the streets are a real distraction to me as a driver. And the message, if it's words, is lost because you can't read it if I'm driving across. And at the same time, I find it offensive to ride across people's art. So I respect art, but to have it on a public street where people are walking on it and driving on it, to me, it's offensive to the artist because I want to hold that art sacred. So I like to see it where it's where everybody can see it. So that's my opinion.
Other opinions? Councilor Larson, did you have a?
Yes, I do. I would agree with Councilmember Scipio that I think one of the problems we face with this is that, as we've seen in front of City Hall, that the artwork that originally looked very attractive and distinctive is now so distorted and almost unlegible. And we don't have a mechanism for removal of this stuff, quite honestly. We don't have a timeline that it needs to be painted over by. We don't have guidelines as material that might wash away with 6 or 9 months worth of weather. I know that there are paints that are used to mark utilities, for example, that are put down that will eventually disappear in the weather. And I am a little concerned that we're going to end up with a lot of painted streets that are weathered and worn and illegible, and we don't have a program for eventually cleaning the canvas back up again. And I don't know whether the city is willing to come back in and retar the streets over on top of some of these that are eventually going to have to be dealt with in some form or fashion. I don't know, but I am a little concerned that eventually it's going to be rather tacky rather than art. So maybe some consideration could be to, one, materials used that are less permanent in the form or maybe a consideration could be that the life of each individual piece of art is limited to a year or so, and then there's a requirement that it be covered over with a new coating of tar over the road surface. So something that would allow us to always maintain a pristine look on this artwork.
Anything else? Councilmember Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to say, I do believe that this might be just a bit much. It might be overwhelming to have art, beautiful or not, on our city streets and sidewalks everywhere. And I'm concerned about the maintenance of the art as it was brought up earlier, right out in front of City Hall, where it is fading. What is the process, and how costly will that process be if we have to cover the art once it starts to fade on numerous streets? I think that art has its place, and I think having designated locations for beautiful art depictions is what, we need to focus on as far as displaying it, but not the city streets and sidewalks everywhere, anywhere. Thank you.
All right, committee has spoken loud and clear. I have to say that I'm disappointed as the City of Arts and Innovation that we are not open to more opportunities to place art. I'm going to say that if I'm an artist and I want to put down my painting in the street, I'm pretty well aware that it's going to get run over or walked on. It is not like putting one on the side of a building. We do already have a policy in place that defines the materials that have to be used, et cetera. So I brought up for exactly that reason, and it looks like this is going nowhere. So we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. All right, may we have G5, please?
Item G5, update on city county utility services.
And this one is going to Aaron King, and I guess we're probably going to hear from Courtney Driver.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Courtney, I listened to your presentation to the planning board and was very impressed with it. So I wanted you to bring that to this group to just get an update, a refresher on our utility system. So if you'll proceed, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm happy to be here. So thanks for having me. And so good evening, Chair, members of the Public Works Committee and Council. I am going to give you a brief update on the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utilities Department. And I see the slides are up, so you can move on to the next slide. First, I'm going to start with just a departmental overview. This may be information that some of you already know, but I thought for the new, any new council members or anyone that's viewing this presentation, it might be new information. So next slide. Okay, so Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utilities is a joint department between Winston-Salem and Forsyth County. We are governed by a board called the Winston-Salem Forsyth County Utility Commission, and its members are appointed by both the City Council and the Forsyth County Commissioners. The Utilities Department employees are City of Winston-Salem employees, so we report up through the City Manager's office, and our department is made up of 6 different divisions. We have administration, water treatment, wastewater treatment, solid waste services, solid waste disposal services, utilities field operations, and meter services. We have 384 employees that make up our department, and we are 24/7, 365-day operations. So we always have someone on call to handle emergencies, and we always have employees at our treatment facilities operating those plants. So Christmas Day, Thanksgiving, any day in the middle of the night, someone's always there. Okay, next slide. Again, we are a joint agency, and we were formed by the merger of the city and county water systems in 1976. Since that merger, we have merged with other systems, including the Clemens system, Kernersville, Louisville, Walkertown. So we serve the majority of Forsyth County, and we also provide wholesale services to some entities outside the county. So we provide water to Stokesdale, Yadkin County, Greensboro, Davidson County. We provide sewer service to King, Davie County, and Davidson County. So we consider ourselves a regional and wholesale provider. The solid waste disposal service responsibilities was added to the commission as a responsibility in 1990. And something that a lot of people may not know is that we are an enterprise fund. We have two enterprise funds, one for water and sewer and one for solid waste. And that means that we're not funded by the local taxes. We receive our revenues from the water and sewer bill that people pay, that our customers pay, and the tipping fees that are paid at the landfills. This slide is a comparison of our water and sewer bill to some of our peers in the state. This is an average monthly bill for our customers. And as you can see, we're comparing ourselves to Charlotte, Durham, Greensboro, High Point, Raleigh. We have very competitive rates. Our customers on average are paying a little bit over $50 for both water and sewer service monthly. And if you look at the other utility bills you may be paying, phone, cable, and the critical nature of the service we provide, we think, if you imagine your day without water and sewer service and how it'd be very different, we feel like we're providing a good service at a good price. Okay, next slide. The next slide is a comparison of our solid waste disposal rates. Again, you can see how competitive we are with other publicly owned landfills. So Winston-Salem, we charge $34 for our large haulers, and that is per ton, and $36 for our other customers. I did want to also point out that our Haynesville landfill is the largest municipally owned and operated landfill in the state. So there are other landfills that are maybe larger, but however, they're not publicly owned. They could be privately owned and privately operated. Okay, next slide. So a financial update. Next slide, please. So we've been tracking the impacts that we've seen from the pandemic for some time now. This slide shows our past due balance history, and it goes back to May of 2020. And you can see that our past due balance has increased. We hit a peak in October of last year. We have seen a decrease. However, here recently, we're seeing somewhat of another slight increase, not the same as it was the end of last year, but we're seeing some increases. So we continue to partner with agencies that are providing funding and assistance to our customers. One of those programs is ERAP, which stands for Emergency Rental and Assistance Program, and that can be used not only for rental payments, but also for utility bills. So we're trying to make sure we notify and educate our customers that that assistance is out there and available. Okay, next slide. This slide, similar to the previous one, shows our delinquent accounts. So this is the number of delinquent accounts that we currently have. Again, you see an increase from May through the end of last year, and a decrease at the beginning of this year, and of course a little slight increase again now, which we are closely monitoring. Okay, this is a financial update of how we ended FY21, where we ended with our revenues. So on the water and wastewater side, this graph, the blue shaded area shows our budget. The blue bar shows our actuals and revenues received in 2021, and then the red bar is the actuals for the previous year, so 2020. So we did meet our budget, and we did receive revenues higher than the previous year. I do want to note that when we were setting the budget for FY21, the pandemic had just hit, so we knew we were going to have impacts, didn't know what those would be, but we did set a very conservative budget. And even though we met that budget, we still aren't at the levels of our revenue of what we had anticipated pre the pandemic. Next slide. So the solid waste revenues, a similar graph. The solid waste fund did meet its revenues per the budget. 21 was slightly less though for revenues than the previous year of 2020. Next slide. Okay, capital improvements. We manage several capital improvements throughout the year, so I can't hit on all of them, but I am going to just focus on two major ones that we have going on right now. So next slide. Our Nielsen water treatment plant renovation project. The Nielsen water treatment plant is the largest water treatment plant in the system with a treatment capacity of 48 million gallons per day. It's located in Clemens. It has had two major expansions since the construction of the original 24 million gallon a day plant in 1964. Next slide. So the approved budget for this project is $121,870,000. The design, bidding, and construction administration services cost is right at $12.4 million. We recently received construction bids, and the low bid came in at $107,445,000. And this project will address aging facilities, process improvements, obsolete and failing equipment, redundancy and reliability issues, and workplace safety and operational improvements. The council has seen this project several times on their agenda because we've brought items to you to approve low interest rate state revolving funds. And we've actually got a total of 80 million that has been approved so far of low interest rate loans for this project. Next slide. The next project I'll discuss is our advanced metering infrastructure program. This project will allow us to be able to read our meters through a network versus manually reading them. We manually read meters right now. And so customers receive bills every 60 days just because of how long it takes us to get through all those reads manually. Next slide. So the program will include replacement of 130,000 water meters and new radio endpoints. So we have 130,000 connections in our system. So that's many that we're manually reading right now. It includes rehabilitation of related distribution system infrastructure to current standards, installation and maintenance of the radio network for 20 years. And it also includes a water smart customer portal. So what that means is customers can view their consumption history in real time, and they'll also receive alerts of possible leaks. Whereas in the past, they'd have to wait to receive their bill, and could be 60 days, and they've had a leak for a month or two and experience a high bill. So this will allow them to be notified immediately if there's anything out of the ordinary going on with their water consumption. This graph shows the different areas that we're working in right now. So if you can see the alpha and beta areas, they are shaded like a pink, purple, blue color. And right now we've installed approximately 10,000 meters in those areas. And in our gamma area, which is the pinkish red area, there's 34 meters to be installed, but we've just started the field work in that area as of now. Okay. FY21 accomplishments. We've completed year 5 of our collection system improvement program, which resulted in the lowest sanitary sewer overflow count in utility history, which I'm very proud of. We completed the advanced metering infrastructure program initial deployment. We completed an affordability study of water and sewer rates within our service area. We transitioned the utilities administration staff from City Hall to Bryce Stewart Building. We continue the permitting process for mechanically stabilized earthen wall for Haynesville Road landfill, which is going to give us approximately 7 additional years of capacity at the landfill. And we did expand the landfill gas well filled system at Haynesville Road landfill. And we completed multiple capital projects with approximately $53 million spent. And so these are just some of our accomplishments. Obviously, our core function is treating water and disposing of trash. So we obviously have a good compliance history with our regulations, and obviously want to maintain that compliance record. So with that, I believe that's my last slide. So I will be happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you. Committee members or council members? I see Councilmember Scipio.
Thank you, Ms. Driver, for a great presentation and learning more and more about utilities. Going back to that map that had gamma deployment areas, and I do know that you're city, county, but the gray area, the corporate, no, the red areas are where the meters have been deployed or not.
So the
wasn't
alpha
sure.
and the beta areas are where we have installed 10,000 meters. So that's kind of your purplish blue area. Our next phase is called our gamma. And so we've started the field work, and that's the red areas. So we have not installed those meters yet. We've just started the field work, and there's going to be 34,000 meters in that area that will be installed soon.
The gray area, there are no meters?
Yeah, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. I know that these meters have been installed in certain neighborhoods where I have lived or I know about. And it doesn't look like they're alpha or beta area.
And
but they're in the city.
And you were saying that there are meters that are being read remotely in these areas that are not?
Oh, you know what? They're not the meter. They can read them from the street.
Yes.
They don't have to go and look into the little well, I think.
Yeah. So we have some before we started our.
Okay. You know what?
Go ahead.
I'm thinking of the Duke Power meters. I'm sorry. That's what I was thinking about, because they can actually look at the electricity. They can meet your reader from the street. They don't have to come on the property anymore. That's not what you're doing.
I think we do have some meters in our system that are able to be read by drive-by. It's a different technology, so maybe you're recalling that. So we do have about 16,000 meters with the ability to drive by within a distance and pick up the read versus, having a person actually physically go up and lift the meter lid and read the meter that way.
So my real question is, if I was looking at this map, how did they choose which areas get the transfer of the meters first? Because it looks like the city itself has very few areas, and these new meters are going out in the county first and not in the city.
So that's a good question. We look at, when we try to determine where we're going to go first, we look at a lot of different things. One of the main things we look at is areas where we have problems reading meters currently. So if there's areas that are high traffic areas on a busy road, places like that, we want to try to focus on those first. And there's a number of other reasons why we try to group this. We're also trying to group them in different cycles as far as how we read the meters. So there's several different factors that we look at to determine what gets broken out into the different phases.
Other questions? Courtney, I've got a couple. What percentage, we see this every year, and I sort of know the approximate number, but what percentage of our total budget belongs to utilities?
Oh gosh, you're going to ask me. I see.
It's roughly 45%, right? Somewhere in that area. It's a big part of our budget. Yes. And yet, as you stated earlier, that does not come from property tax. Those are strictly user fees. But when we see the big pie chart, it's a huge percentage of it. And when you guys take on a project, it's a big project. It's a lot of money. It's a big capital expense. And that I'm on the North Carolina League of Municipalities, and you see smaller communities struggle because they don't have the mass to the amount of property tax to pay for some of these big ticket items. And it's a real problem we're very blessed to be in the situation that we're in. I'm going to go to Councilmember Larson. He had a question.
Yes, Courtney, the base stations for receiving the broadcasting from these new water meters, are they all in place?
They are not all in place. We are working on those now. We currently are working on some lease agreements on some jointly owned city-county radio towers now. There's 6 of those facilities that we'll be using. Of course, we'll be using any infrastructure like our water tanks that are high enough and in the right location. So those have not all been, they've not all been installed, but that's definitely part of the part of the process, and we're installing them as we go.
So they really dictate on where you're putting the meters.
Well, the meters in the service area really dictate, I guess, where we need those base stations at, you know, so we can make sure we're getting coverage for all of our customers.
So what is the timeline that you have right now for installation in the majority of the meters within the city limits?
So the project itself, we hope would be complete in 5 years. So you know, originally we had an aggressive time frame of 3 years, but I think that's going to be a little too aggressive. So especially with the supply chain issues that we're facing right now with some of our meters and endpoints and chips. So, you know, hopefully this will all be completed within another 4 or 5 years.
Now, these meters allow me as a customer to actually access my usage and my current billing, right? So is there going to be instructions on how to do that in my next water bill or something?
So not your next one, but because I don't know where you're at in the rotation, but definitely education and training and helping our customers learn what option, you know, letting them know what options they have available to them will definitely be part of this rollout process. Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Courtney, another question that I had goes back to the numbers that you showed about delinquencies. How soon do you think we'll get back to a number that resembles our pre-pandemic numbers?
You know, it's a really good question and really hard to answer. I'm hoping the sooner the better, but we are really working on our efforts to try to market these programs out there so that, you know, our customers know that they're out there and they're available. Unfortunately, you know, we have picked back up on cutoffs where we're having to cut some of our customers off, and we have not been as aggressive with that, and it may require that we start being more aggressive to try to push that and get people to pay and reach out to those programs that are available if they need the help.
All right. Okay, but we are seeing a trend back towards pre-pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah. So Courtney kind of skipped over this one or went past it pretty quickly, but the lowest SSO count in utility history is a really big deal. When a sanitary sewer overflow occurs, people get real mad. It's messy. It is not fun for anybody involved. And to see that number be down this low is just really a compliment to the entire division and utility group. So thank you very much for working on that one. It's not real well known, but it's good that one is where it is.
Thank you.
And then I would highly encourage everyone, once the pandemic has subsided somewhat, to get out and visit facilities. I've been holding off on that, but hopefully very soon we should all get out and check out what has been built with our tax dollars or not our tax dollars, but our water dollars. We should be really proud of this system. It is really remarkable, and it's one that other communities would. So I just want to compliment Courtney and her staff, and then I see Councilmember Scipio has a question or comment.
Yeah, let me just piggyback first, Mr. McIntosh, on visiting the facilities. I did prior to that. We had open house, I think, at the Nielsen plant. I can't remember. The one out near Clemens, yeah. Yep. And it's a fascinating tour. It is a marvelous thing to see how our water is purified and to know how pure it really is. It's a fascinating learning experience. My question, though, Courtney, I was looking at our past due balances and our revenues and that kind of the dollars. How much of the most recent revenues are reflecting of rate increases? Are we comparing over the trend
Yes.
The same rate, or are we looking at increased rates?
So we did have a rate increase that went into effect this past July. It was the first rate increase that we had for our volumetric rates in a couple of years. We did not increase rates through when the pandemic first hit. So for the FY21 budget, we did not increase rates, which is part of the reasons why we haven't met those revenue numbers that we had projected we would be at, prior to the pandemic. So, but yes, we did have a moderate rate increase that went in effect in July.
And when I look at our delinquent accounts, we actually are lower than pre-pandemic for delinquent accounts, if I'm reading that chart right.
So the chart goes back to May of 2020. So the pandemic really started in March. So we typically do have a number of delinquent accounts or past due balances, but it's not been at the level that it is right now.
Yeah, but it looks like it's just about 11,000, and the high was 18 in December of 20. But correct. In May of 20, it was 13. So in many ways, we're looking much better. But I think part of that might be the ERAP money too.
Right.
That may have come and taken care of some of that.
Great. Anything else from the committee or the council? Courtney, thank you very much on a very educational presentation. We need to have you back on a regular basis just to keep tabs. And like I said, we all need to get out and visit the facilities. And when I've asked you about it in the past, you said, just go and show up and talk to somebody on site, right?
Yes, we encourage tours, and we love to show off what we do and the critical services that we provide. So if anybody's interested, they definitely can reach out.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, that brings us to item G6.
Item G6, information on the We Play Memorial Program.
Okay, I had brought this up and asked for this to be on the agenda based on a conversation I've had with multiple people over the last several years about our memorial tree program. So if I could ask Mr. Taylor and Ms. Friend to give us an update on how that program works, maybe we can offer some comments on it.
Good evening, Chairman McIntosh. I'm going to ask Ms. Leah Friend, Assistant Recreation and Parks Director, to come forward with the presentation.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Leah Friend, Assistant Recreation Director, and I'm going to provide information on the We Play Memorial Program. Next slide, please. Great. Recreation and Parks established the Memorial Program in 1998 to provide city residents a way to honor a valued person by purchasing a tree or a bench to be placed in the park. The program is created to replace trees that were damaged in storms in the spring and fall of 1998. The trees add to the beauty of parks, while the benches provide a nice place to sit and enjoy the scenery. Next slide, please. Citizens are able to pick a tree from a predetermined list that will either be planted in the fall or spring in a location best determined by the department. Memory trees are often found along trails, greenways, parks, and recreation facilities. The trees are identified with a weatherproof tag that provide the honoree's name and common tree name. There is a 1-year warranty on all planted trees. Next slide, please. So Recreation and Parks works with vegetation management to determine the best trees for park locations. Currently, the memory tree selection list consists of 26 different ornamental trees. And as you guys can see, there's a list of all the trees. Next slide, thank you. So memory benches allow a nice place to sit and rest in the parks. The benches are wooded slatted benches that are installed within 3 months of the request, weather permitting. A weatherproof tag is attached to the top slat with the honoree's name and inscription engraved on it. The department determines the best suitable location in parks for installation. Next slide, please. So if you have any more questions, or if you have questions or need additional information, please feel free to contact us at weplayevents@cityofws.org. Next slide. Do you guys have any questions?
Nice and brief. Good job, Leah.
Thank you.
Committee and council, have we got any questions? Councilmember Scipio.
Since we've had this program since 1998,
Yes, ma'am.
how many trees have actually been planted to recognize people?
So there has been an estimated number of over 4,000 trees that have been planted amongst our parks, and at least last count was about 1,200 benches.
4,000 people have a memory tree.
Yes, ma'am.
How wonderful.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Any other questions or comments? John, Mr. Larson?
Thank you. Quite a presentation. Couple questions. Do we do an annual inspection or occasional inspection to make sure the trees are still alive?
Councilmember Larson, we do go out and we do look at our trees. Like I said, a lot of our trees are planted in parks, greenways, and trails, so they're very visible to the community. So we don't get to see all of them, but we definitely rely on citizens that will often, as they notice the tags on the trees, will report if anything's damaged.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. One other question, I guess, is what's the price of a tree and a bench?
So pricing varies depending upon the type of tree that you get. It can be anywhere from $75 to $150, and the benches are $200.
Thank you.
Councilmember Burke. You're on mute. Won't it be great when we don't have to use that phrase ever again?
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
Thank you, Ms. Friend. That was a wonderful presentation. And I think that Councilmember Larson asked the questions that I had. I wanted to know about the cost. And so you answered those questions again. I think this is a great program, and thanks for the presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And so, Ms. Friend, just to clarify, the cost of the tree and the bench is paid by whom?
It's paid by the citizen.
Right. So it's not a cost to the city.
No, sir.
Great. Any other questions? One of my reasons for bringing this up was to see if we could be more strategic. In our last meeting at Community Development, we talked about sustainability and how we enhance our tree canopy. And in conversations with folks from Recreation Parks and folks from Sustainability and Mr. Taylor, I'd like to explore if we can target and be more strategic about where we put big trees. And I don't know a methodology for that, but I know that some parks, folks who use the park say that the park is less usable now because it's being overrun with dogwoods and redbuds and crepe myrtles. And so what was once an open space is now clogged, as it were.
Yeah.
But is there opportunity to partner with maybe the school system? I know I drive by a lot of school system properties and they tend to seem fairly barren. And there are neighborhoods that don't have as much tree canopy as others. So how can we potentially use this really great program to further some other goals that we have?
So I'm going to answer a portion of this and then defer to William for the next part. But we have definitely acknowledged that some of our parks become oversaturated with trees. And so at one point, we let citizens pick where they wanted those trees to be planted. Over the years, as you guys have noticed, that there are a lot of memory trees. We have some very special parks that people tend to, go towards a little bit more than others. So, to get those trees evenly planted across our parks, because we want them all to be beautiful. So we have eliminated the option for people to choose so that we can get a little bit more of that spread throughout the city of Winston-Salem and our parks. William, did you want to add on to any of that in regards to schools?
Yes, Leah. Good evening, Chair, members of the committee, members of the City Council. We actually have worked with our school system in the past, mainly with our memory bench program. We have several benches that are located on school property. We will have worked with the school system in the past, and we'll continue to work with them in the future when we do receive those requests. It's something that we haven't actually promoted or taken an active role to inform citizens about that's an option. But to piggyback on a point that Leah was making earlier, there really wasn't a lot of internal regulation in terms of where trees are planted. And so you will see sites like Shaffer Park and Stratford Road Park that were once pretty open places. And there really isn't anywhere else in these in certain parks to plant additional trees. And so what we've done internally is try to redirect those requests to other parks and other areas throughout our park system where we can accommodate them and where we actually do need them. But this is a great suggestion to kind of look at some of our other public agencies, such as the school system, to look if we can use some of their property to help continue to beautify our city when we do receive these requests.
Well, and one other thing I'd like to bring up is that we need to sort of eat our own cooking here to some degree. We need to look at city properties that are less than covered by tree canopy. And I mean, from a sustainability standpoint, anywhere we can put in a big canopy tree, we should. It seems between Community Roots Day, which is an incredible effort every year. I'm hoping it's back this year. Between that and these memorial trees, it seems like we have the opportunity to put a lot of trees in the ground. So I guess my suggestion is to be strategic about it. Maybe, I don't know if you guys are aware of this thing called iTree Canopy. It's a GIS tool that allows you to look at where you've got good coverage and where you don't. But to really get some big trees in the ground. I live in, my house is in the woods. I lost 5 big trees this year. We lose them. And so not only do we have to add to the current stock, but we need to keep up with things that come down due to age or weather or whatever. So, and I've spoken with William about this in the past, and I know he's on board, and I know you guys have done a bunch of work on it. So I'm very enthusiastic about it. I'm a big supporter. I just want to make sure that we continue to press on that. And, as we're all dealing with the effects of climate control or climate change, climate control, this is a potential control method that we can, I think, contribute to and make a difference in. So thank you very much for that report. Councilmember Scipio.
One of the things we can also think about is enhancing our neighborhoods, because we're talking about putting those trees in parks. But if we work with community development, perhaps a memory tree can be in a neighborhood for people so that, it's a beautiful thing, or bench to make our neighborhoods more livable, particularly where we know we don't have as much coverage. Thinking out of the box and working with the various departments within the city might bring about a beautiful transition with the trees. So I do like that. Thank you very much. I wasn't aware of this program. And I hope that we continue to promote it for residents to honor. And you don't have to be deceased to have a memory tree, do you?
No.
It's anybody you want to honor, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. The program, it provides an opportunity to provide to purchase a tree or a bench in honor of someone that is currently living, but also pay respect to those that have passed. And so we have both options available. And and Leah's been leading an effort to continue to look at other ways that we can expand this program. But we are being very strategic in choosing the locations of trees, much more so now than we ever have been in the past.
Both location and species. I know back in the early 90s in the Holly Avenue neighborhood, we planted a couple of hundred Bradford pears. Now there are about 4 of them left. Right? Because they were everybody's favorite, and just like kind of crepe myrtles are now. So a little variety, native species, just and taller trees. I know that it creates more work for staff, but to maintain them. But I think it's something that we need to step up to. Councilmember Larson, you got a question?
Yes, looking at the tree selection list, I'm kind of curious to talk about canopy trees, why we don't have some trees like poplar or oak trees, some of the larger trees that particularly could be placed in open areas within the park systems or stuff that we have. I think particularly at Quarry Park, where we have some open space where large oak trees would do very well. A poplar, which is a fairly fast-growing tree, would be appropriate.
Good question.
Is there some reason why the larger canopy trees, a lot of these trees are clearly designed to be along roadways or close to the urban environment, but just give some thought to maybe adding to the large canopy trees.
Excellent point.
Taking, Councilmember Larson, the plant list was over the years was kind of developed based on the requests that we received from citizens, but it's not exclusive. Citizens have purchased other trees, shade trees, and other types of canopy trees, but maybe it may be a good idea to provide that as an option when we do receive those requests, and we can work with our vegetation management department to include those different types of canopy trees moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe do a little guidance of folks who don't really know what they want and say, well, we could really use a couple canopy trees here in this neighborhood. And I know I've talked to Keith Huff, and there are very good reasons not to plant certain species in the well between the sidewalk and the curb, because they break up the road, break up the sidewalk. So those things have to be taken into consideration. But all in all, whatever we can do to increase our canopy, I think is well done. Okay, thank you very much. Great discussion, folks. All right, anything else before we retire for the evening?
Yes.
Councilmember Burke.
Yes, I failed to say thank you to Aaron King when he made his 2 presentations earlier, and I just want to say thank you to Mr. King.
Thank you, Councilmember Burke.
He's a rock star.
Yes, he is.
All right, folks, on that note, if there's nothing further, we will adjourn.
Thank you.
Very much.